So Diane, as you can see, she's in our screen here. She's a support instructor with the Ottawa Carleton District School Board's ESL Link and LBS programs. She began teaching in 1993, and her focus has been supporting staff and students in their use of technology. She's been an editor of Connect, a board member of New Language Solutions, and most recently has managed the OCDSB's module development project. So we have a great expert for technology with us today. Diane, could you take it away, please?
Thanks, Catherine, and thanks, Hannah, for such a great lead in to my presentation. I love the comments about the positivity. So I'm going to share my screen and get us going here. Oh, I started at the end. That's not a good place to start. Okay. So I'm hoping everybody can see my slides okay. Good. So as Catherine said, I work for the OCDSB as a support instructor with a focus on tech. And this is the agenda I have for the day. It seems quite large, but I'm going to just briefly touch on each of these topics. First of all, talking about identifying who has digital literacy needs. What barriers do they face? Define a little bit on defining what are digital literacy skills. So I'm going to talk to you about some of the common digital literacy issues that I see. I also teach an LBS computer workshop class, so a lot of this comes from my experience there as well. We're going to talk a little bit, I'm going to mention some brief teaching and troubleshooting tips around digital literacy, give you a list of some ready-made resources, and then talk a little bit to the admin side of things about not forgetting the teacher's needs. So that's the plan. And we're going to jump right into the just the topic of who has digital literacy needs. And I always kind of start with that because a lot of people go into that question with the assumption that, oh, that's lower level students and literacy students. So it is true that that's where the majority of the needs are, but I'd like to also bring to everybody's attention that there are needs in all the CLB levels for digital literacy instruction. If you look at the 1-2s, for example, you get a lot of young students that are great on social media, but don't have those skills, that tech skills or digital literacy skills that they need for school and for work. So they're missing those skills. And then at the other end of the spectrum, you'll have some students in higher level classes that maybe probably have a literacy background, maybe have gone through some ESL classes before, but have never had the opportunity to learn the digital literacy skills. So they haven't been part of the classes they've been in, or they've been in a class where the majority of the students already have those skills, so that just doesn't get taught in that kind of a circumstance. So those are students who have these needs as well. So I wanted to make sure we consider them. So the main barrier that I'm going to talk about is the lack of access to equipment, and I'm sure you've had that experience with some of your students. They don't have the equipment at home, or they have limited equipment that they have to share with their students or with their children, for example. And in brainstorming what to do about that within our program, we looked at these 4 topics. But what we ended up working on with our students is the used equipment. And so we explored options of working with a company that works with the Computers for Schools program. And we put together a package with them that met certain minimum criteria. And approximately 80 of our students were able to get used laptops through that program for a cost that was minimal. And so that was the choice, the route that we went. The other options are other ones that could be considered as well. Now, moving on to what are digital literacy skills. When we discuss digital literacy skills, we need to keep in mind that tech is now part of every aspect of our daily lives. So we have to think about what does that mean for digital literacy instruction. is teaching students Microsoft Word on a desktop computer enough? Or should we be teaching them how to use their cell phones, or how to use the self-serve kiosk at McDonald's, or the parking app, or the EI website? So that's something I want to throw out there. So what I did for today's presentation is I put together a list of some of the common digital literacy topics in the center of the screen. And so those topics might be part of a workshop or a class where a teacher is focusing on digital literacy skills. I've also added on the outsides of the slide examples of where you'll see technology used in everyday circumstances in the home, in the community, in school, and in work. And this certainly isn't an exhaustive list, but it's just some ideas that popped into my head. So you can see that technology is now part of our everyday life. So as we talk about digital literacy skills, I want to talk about the fact that definitely these types of, I'm going to call them tasks, can be real world tasks. So they can be part of your regular curriculum that you're teaching and assessing. In its general form, an example like finding information on the internet, that wouldn't necessarily be a task, but as you put it in a context, then it definitely is a task. It definitely is a real world task. So finding information on the internet about treatments for sunburn, that's definitely a real world task. So we're going to start with a little group work activity where I'm going to ask you to go into groups and do a little brainstorming, and then I'll do a recap afterwards. We're going to brainstorm the skill building required to find for the task, finding information on the internet. So this is a common task that can be done at a variety of CLB levels. And so it is also an extremely difficult task for a lot of students, not just because of the English load that's required, but because of the technical skills that are required, the digital literacy skills that are required. So what I want you to do is think about, if you're going to teach or work with a class on finding information on the internet, what skill building would you need to do to work up to that task? So I've given you an example there. First, you need to make sure students know and can find an internet browser on their device. So that's step number one. Do they know where to go to access the internet? So that's the simple basic starting point. But from there to finding the information they need, there's a big sequence of skills or steps that they need to take, that they need to be able to do. So that's what I want you to think about. I'm going to put you in groups of three to four people. And because of time constraints, we're not going to record anything per se, but I am going to ask you to come up with at least 3 or 4 steps or skills. And just amongst yourself, just discussing. So we'll give you about 5 minutes or so. I might drop into some groups and see how things are going. But I'm going to put you in the breakout rooms, hopefully. And I think I have to stop sharing to do that. Okay, so there we go. Okay, so again, I'll put you in the groups, have a discussion about the skills required to work up to finding information on the internet, and there'll be a little message when it's time to return. Okay, so if we had more time, I would have us come back and have a little reporting from each group and share your ideas, but unfortunately, because of the time constraints, I'm going to present you with a list that I've come up with. I certainly heard some things that weren't on my list. So what I'm going to invite you to do is, as I go through my list, if you would just add your own ideas to the chat, anything that I'm missing from my list that you found that was unique for your group, please add it in the chat. So As I said, starting with knowing what an internet browser is and being able to find it on their device, that's the first step. After that, I tend to talk about how to get to specific websites using or typing in the website address. And in doing that, I introduce the idea of a website address and what does it look like? What are the formats for it? And the idea that it is possible to guess the address for a website, and that you can find information by guessing what organization or what company would have the best answer to your solution. So if you want to order something online and you want to order it from a particular store, then you have to be able to get to that store's website. You're not going to search for the leather purse. You're going to search for the website of the company. So that's the first step that I usually talk about. And then I get into going on and talking about search engines and what they are, the options that are available, and how to get to a search engine. So like Google. And from there, the idea of what keywords do you use is a really big one. And I heard a couple groups discussing that. So a couple people had some good ideas about how to teach students how to identify what keywords are best to use to find your answer. And especially with literacy students, I find that to be a really difficult challenge for some of them. And so we do some work on, I want to find this information, what would the keywords be? So not in the context of on the computer yet, but just what would you identify as the keywords? So then how to enter them, how to start the search. And then the other big thing that is really hard for a lot of students is understanding the layout of the search results list. And that's becoming more and more complicated as Google starts to throw more and more things into a search result page. And so they need to know how that page is laid out. How is it divided? Where are the ads? And I heard ads mentioned in one of the groups. Where is the featured information that Google is trying to present? How do you navigate from one page to the other? Do you want to narrow your search? Do you want to go up to the top and only look at pictures or videos? And then I heard as well people talking about making judgments about where the information is coming from. So if you want to find something on a bylaw, you want to go to the city website. You don't want to go to another source. So making judgments about where the information is coming from. And then being able to identify the link. So it's not as easy as it might seem. The website address, they can identify, usually when you click on a website address, you can go there. But on a Google search page, you click on the address, you don't go anywhere. You have to click on the name of the website. So that's a step that some students don't understand. And then you get results where you get the home page listed and then sub pages listed as well. So that idea of how the list is organized is really complex if they're not familiar with formatted text. Also, then once they get to the website itself, again, we've got layout issues. So this is an ad, you can ignore that. This is an ad, you can ignore that. The page is divided into sections, menus at the top, and links, and so on. And then, of course, there's the typical skills that you can teach of skimming and scanning, using headings to go to the right section of the page. So that's the list that I came up with. Hopefully people are sharing some other ideas in the chat. Here's just a quick example of a web page search results for a t-shirt buying a t-shirt from Walmart. And so you can see the different things that are thrown in there that can throw students off. Google randomly throws in images in the middle of the search list. It throws in other suggested searches in the middle there. So it really starts to lose the idea that it's a list. And so that can throw students off quite a bit. Okay, we're going to move on to some common digital literacy issues that I see often when I work with students. And sometimes I work with students in a class, but I also work with students one-on-one who are having problems with a particular issue in one of their classes, technical issue. And so I'm going to go through some of those common issues. And the first one I want to talk about is the basics of knowing how to use a mouse and a trackpad. But I want to emphasize again that this can appear in all different CLB levels. You may have a student who can do something like click with a trackpad or even double click, but do they know how to drag? Do they know how to right click? Do they really know how to scroll with a trackpad? And that is something that you can see even at higher levels. They don't know those specialized skills. So I made some short little videos for students to look at. I'm going to just play this one for you. Hopefully you can hear the sound.
How to use a trackpad. A trackpad is like a mouse. You can move the arrow around the screen. You can move it up, down, left, right. This trackpad has two buttons, a left button and a right button. With the left button, we can click. Click to choose something. We can double click. Double click. Double click. 2 times very fast to start something or open something. We can right click. Right click with the right button. Right click. Right click to see a menu, to see what you can do on the computer. Right click. When you want to go up and down, you can use 2 fingers. 2 fingers to go up and down. That's called scrolling. Scrolling. When you want to move something, you use 2 fingers also. 1 finger, hold the left button. The other finger, move. Hold the left button, move the other finger. That's called dragging. You drag or move something on the screen. This computer has a trackpad, or this laptop has a trackpad. It doesn't have any buttons. Moving is the same. You can move the arrow. You move the arrow up, down, left, right. Sometimes we call the arrow or the arrow the cursor. Move the cursor. You can click like this any place on the screen or on the trackpad. Click to choose something. Click, click. When you want to open or start something, you can double click. Double click 2 times very fast. To right click, we use 2 fingers. 2 fingers, 1 click. So that's right click to see a menu, to see what you can do. Scrolling is the same, going up and down, 2 fingers, up, down, scroll up and down the page. And last, to move something, hold, you need 2 fingers to move something, hold 1 finger down, move the other finger. Hold 1 finger down, move the other finger. That's called dragging. So you can drag something on a trackpad with 2 fingers.
Okay. Oh. I hear something. I'm not sure if that's me or hopefully not me. Okay, so that was my little video of using a trackpad. So there's lots to learn there, even for people who are at a higher level. Lots of language there. You could use it as a listening activity as well. So the next thing I wanted to talk about was identifying buttons and symbols. Where do they click? And this is where I have done flashcards. So I find, especially when we're online, the easiest way to get students to click on the right button is to use flashcards. So I have the picture and the word to reinforce that. So I have some flashcards that I will share with you afterwards. And also the teaching of symbols and what do they mean. So symbols without words, that's another thing that I think is really important, a reading task as well. Teaching students the prepositions they need or they'll hear from the teacher when they're listening to instructions about where to click. All of these words are useful words for them to know. So the corner, the left, the right, up, the top and the bottom, important vocabulary to make sure they know. When you're giving instructions, especially technology-related instructions, this is what I would think about in order to make those instructions as simple as possible if the objective is to get them to do that task. So first, if you look at the first 4 steps, I've simplified the grammar. After that, you'll see I've replaced next with the number 2 because, of course, numbers are easier for them to follow. And then I replaced tap with the word click. And you may think, why did I do that? I did that because our students were used to using click in a lab. And so I thought that was a more familiar word for them. And then using bold, or in the end, just simplifying it down to the one word that you want them to find, that would be my way of simplifying that instruction as much as possible. This is another big one that I find, especially when we're doing online classes, students having difficulty navigating between open windows or tabs within Google Chrome, for example. So this is where it really helped for me to get out the dividers from my binder. I put little X's on them to reinforce that they were similar to the tabs on the screen, and then I could say close, and I could say click on the 3rd tab, this one. So we could really work on knowing what those words at the top of the screen meant, that they were tabs. The other thing that came up really early on for us in our program was we had students using ESL Library and they had to make accounts, and teachers would complain that their students had multiple accounts, not just one. And we realized quickly that the reason that was happening is because they didn't understand the vocabulary or the difference between signing in and signing up. And so there's a whole series of language that's used on different websites around those 2 different tasks. And so I've taken that language and done activities around that. So here's just one example where you can say, I'm a new user, I need to create an account, where do I click? And so you can work through something like that. And then similarly, I have used this website before, I already have an account, where do I click? So to make sure that they're familiar with that type of language and the idea of making an account and then signing into the account afterwards. Here's a third step that you could take once they know the vocabulary. Then you could, as a class, visit different types of websites or individually or in groups and try to identify the different language used on that website for those 2 different activities. And so here's just an example for Walmart. And it's not as clear as you might think on their website. So I'm going to give you just a minute if you want to quickly navigate your way to a Walmart.ca, you can try to find for us what word they use that people have to click on in order to create an account. So I'll give you a minute if you want to try that. Go to their website and find out for me what is the word that they use if you're new and you want to make an account. If you find the answer, you can come back and put it in the chat. Okay, so somebody found it, but they're going to let others try. Okay, so I see a create an account. Okay. I actually, it was a long time ago I did this activity and I forgot to go and check what it is. Can somebody else just confirm for us that I think the tricky part, I can stop and show the website, but I'm not sure. Okay, we're not in agreement. So I'm going to go and show the website myself. Okay, let's see what we can come up with here. So the tricky part for that was you actually had to click on, if I remember correctly, I should have checked this ahead of time, but if I remember correctly, you have to go to the part that says sign in. Now, I don't want to sign in. I want to actually create an account, but in order to find that, I actually have to go there. And so that's difficult. And then I have to understand new customer, and the answer is actually join now. So that's what you have to click on their website in order to make an account. So there's a few different steps there. So it's not an easy task. Okay, so the next slide issue I wanted to talk about was, again, the issue of formatted text and how that's difficult, especially for literacy students to understand. And we take this kind of thing for granted. So here's an example of an email account. And I wanted to show you or talk about the example that I came across with my students, where I was wanting to help them navigate towards a particular email I had sent them. So I had them share their screen and we did it together. And they could find my name. So the first thing I wanted them to find was to find my name. And then they had a few different emails from me, and I wanted them to find a particular email that said meeting. So I said, look for the name or the title, meeting. And it was really interesting how a couple students, and these are so different, more than one student, would go towards my name. But then when I said, look for the title, the name of the email, meeting, they would actually go to a completely different area on the page. And this is where having them share their screen is really interesting, because as they move their mouse around the screen, you can see where they're looking. So you kind of get a little insight into their heads and where they're thinking. And so what I realized there was that these literacy students did not understand the format of rows in this particular display, this particular text. So they did not understand that everything in one row was related to one email. So that was something I had to explicitly teach. Another little stumbling block that comes up, especially for our students who may have to enter usernames and passwords multiple times before they get it, is the idea of CAPTCHA questions. So if they have to do it more than 2 or 3 times, they might get this kind of a question. And so you can Google under images, CAPTCHA questions, and you'll get some examples of this. And so I've taught students this, and we've talked about what to do. And then I teach some of the common vocabulary. So they use street signs a lot, street lights, crosswalks, and things like that. The other thing I see coming up a lot now is these two-factor authentication questions. And so if you ask students to download an app on their phone, they will usually these days be asked a question like this. And so this is something that you can, if it comes up on your phone, you can take a screenshot of it and then show the class and talk to them about it and what is it. So the next little activity that I want to talk about is another example of an issue that came up with one of the students in one of our literacy classes. The teacher expressed wasn't able to help a student who was in their class. And the scenario was a literacy student was using a phone in an online class, and the teacher was sharing their screen. And the student would say to the teacher, "Teacher, no see." And so the teacher came to me and said, "Can you help me with this? I don't know why the student can't see." And so we did some work on that. We discovered in the end that there was more than one issue going on here. The first one was an English communication issue. So the student was having an issue communicating what the problem was. And then after that, we had to solve two digital literacy issues that she had. So things she wasn't aware of or able to do because she didn't have the technical skills. And so what I thought we would do is just take a minute, and we're not going to take the time to do breakout rooms, but I'm going to ask you to put in the chat what you think was the English communication problem. So what do you think the student was having a problem communicating? And then what do you think were the technical issues or the digital literacy issues? So what were the things that we had to teach that student to do to fix their problem? So I'll give you a minute, and let me see if I can see the chat too, so I can keep an eye out. But see, if you think you know, have any ideas, you can put them in the chat. If you're not sure, that's okay too. I'll go ahead and tell you what happened. But if anybody has an idea. Okay, so I see somebody's mentioned what could be a language issue there, or a communication issue there. Okay. So Kathy is correct. The first language issue was that the student said "teacher no see," but the problem wasn't that their screen was blank. The problem was that the text or whatever the teacher was showing was too small. So that was the actual issue. And so we figured that out by me going in as on a phone as a student into the teacher's meeting, and I could see that. So I could see her screen. So we knew that it wasn't necessarily that. And so we did get from the student that they could see it, but it was just too small. And so then the other two digital literacy issues were first that the student didn't know that they could turn their phone this way and it would be bigger. So we demonstrated, the teacher demonstrated, and we got the student to turn it this way. There was still one more issue with the fact that they still couldn't see it. It was still a little bit too small. So we tried to teach them pinching and spreading to make it bigger. They didn't know how to do that. So we tried to teach that. And at first the teacher didn't have any success doing that. And what was happening is this demonstration, the student didn't understand. And so I broke it down for them by saying, number one, this, number two, this, number one, number two, number one, number two. So that the student understood and was able to make it big enough for them to see. So that was one example of an issue. Okay, so my best troubleshooting tip is have students share their screen so you can see what they can see. So you're not going to necessarily do this in the middle of a class, but although you can, I often ask for a student to volunteer to try what I've just taught and show that to the class. But if you have a particular digital literacy issue that you think's technical, I would wait till the end of the class and do it with the student one-on-one. But definitely teaching even lower level students, literacy students, how to share their screen so you can see what they see is really useful. Teaching tips, don't avoid things the students find difficult. So it's whether it's entering an email or entering a password, teach it, but then give them lots of practice by spiraling back to that and giving them an opportunity to review. Simplifying instructions, we've talked about that, but also using pictures is really important, especially for lower level students. And I've just put on the screen a couple tips for doing that on different devices. And there's a link to a YouTube video for using the snipping tool in Windows. I'm sharing the slides with everybody later, so you can explore that if you wish. Differentiating instructions for different devices if you can. I know that's a tall order, but if possible. And if you are comfortable enough to try Screencastify or Screencast-O-Matic screen capture type programs, making video instructions is definitely easier for students to follow instead of using written instructions. And so this,
Diane, just to
yes?
let you know, 5 more minutes until Q&A.
Great, thanks. So those programs allow you to take record a video of what you're doing on the screen. And then narrating existing videos. So if a program like gcflearnfree.org has good videos on YouTube, but the English is too difficult, you can turn off their sound and narrate it yourself. Now, the issue of what to do with a class where you have a real varying digital literacy needs within the class. I'm just going to mention with lower level class, I do it with the whole class, but emphasize language so that those who know the technical skills, their job is to find to work on their English skills. And once you do that, usually students are okay with that. So do the activity with the entire class. Higher level classes, those basic skills you're probably not going to be able to incorporate into a group activity, but so you might want to refer them to a specialized class, but you still have that opportunity of working on higher level digital literacy instruction with things like presentations, again, emphasizing language and using other students in the class to teach other students, but again, telling them their job is to work on their English while they're helping others. So emphasizing language, make sure you're emphasizing language that's not just the parts of the computer, but verbs and all the language they're going to see as they use different applications. I have provided a list of some ready-made resources, and I'm going to share that at the end as well. And so the ISSBC's digital literacy curriculum you may be familiar with, or CASBA's LBS digital literacy curriculum. Those are some of the most recent ones. There's some other websites there that I really enjoy using with students. Mousercise is a great one for teaching scrolling and checkboxes and radio boxes and double clicking and lots of things. There's a typing practice program. GCF Learn Free has great videos. Digital Learn has great online courses on a variety of topics. And then just at the end, I want to mention to the people with a supporting or administrative role, there is a need not to forget the digital literacy needs of your staff. And I will mention that we at the OCDSB have had great success with doing PD where people of similar levels can get together and share things. And so that has been one activity that's been a really great support for our staff. And then I'll just end by showing this patience. Patience with yourself, patience with your students is always the key when talking about learning new skills, and digital literacy skills are no different. So I think I'll end there, and hopefully there were some things there that you can take away with you to your classes.
Thank you, Diane. So we're going to open up for questions. That was wonderful, Diane. Please, if you have a question, can you type it in the chat?